Hi, I'm Spencer Oberg.
And I'm Vik Chopra.
We are the co-founders of Unincarcerated Productions.
Welcome to Unincarcerated, the podcast. Here is our host, Cameron Collins.
You might be asking yourself right about now, what does it mean to be unincarcerated? Well, at Unincarcerated Productions, the belief is that it means to be liberated from imprisonment of any form and empowered to realize one's highest potential. On Season 1 of Unincarcerated, the podcast, we are going to sit down with each member of the Unincarcerated team and learn about what brought them to being a part of Unincarcerated Productions and where they see Unincarcerated going. This is Unincarcerated, the podcast, Season 1. On this episode of the podcast, we sit down with Vik Chopra, co-founder and director of production for Unincarcerated. Having spent 5 years in prison, Vik came out ready to share his experience behind bars through his skills in media and his passion for filmmaking. This is our conversation with Vik.
This is exciting. I'm happy to finally be doing this.
Yeah, I think it's great that we're here. I think you have a very compelling story that our listeners will definitely enjoy hearing. So let's get right into it. Tell us about you. Who is Vik Chopra?
Wow, that's a loaded question. So much to unpack there, Cameron. But I would start by saying I'm the co-founder and director for Unincarcerated Productions with Spencer Oberg. We co-founded it together.
So what is Unincarcerated Productions for someone who maybe has just stumbled across this podcast, doesn't know anything yet about Unincarcerated?
Unincarcerated Productions is the brainchild of Spencer and I. So we met when we were in work release, which is when you are incarcerated here in Washington State. And when you are 6 months or less to the gate, you have an opportunity to leave your home institution, go back to your county or city of origin, and spend the rest of your time before you're released in a work release center where you get to have a real job. There's more freedoms available. So when I was there here in downtown Seattle, that's where I met Spencer. And we both had media projects that we were developing. I have a background in media here in Seattle, and I've always wanted to be a filmmaker. And he was working on a few projects of his own. And then we decided to partner together. And that was sort of the genesis of what Unincarcerated Productions has become. It started with this idea to do a docuseries chronicling the lives of former prisoners that had done time behind bars and were getting out. And we really wanted to show a different side than what's normally presented in the media. And then I had a documentary feature film that I was developing myself, and he had this other in-prison program that he was developing. So that's how it started. And what it's really evolved into is, we are definitely a film and television production house. We create content that seeks to shift the collective consciousness from intolerance to redemption by humanizing who we call the unincarcerated. And the unincarcerated is sort of a term that we had come up with, which essentially is anyone who has been liberated from imprisonment of any form and empowered to realize their highest potential.
You actually have a direct interest in the unincarcerated. Let's talk about you, but let's start there, and then maybe we can go back to the beginning.
Sure.
What's your connection as an actual unincarcerated individual?
I myself am unincarcerated. I was incarcerated in the Washington State prison system for 5 years. My arrest date was March 28th, 2013, and I was released on January 25th of 2018. So just about 2.5 years ago.
We'll get to more about that experience, but for the listeners, what ended up being the reason that you went to prison?
So I went to prison for, ultimately what my charges were several counts of identity theft and possession of a controlled substance. And it really all stemmed from a really, really terrible path of addiction that me and my ex-partner went down a long time ago. So it started, I worked for 3 years for the local PBS station here in Seattle, KCTS Channel 9, and then went on to a radio station here called KEXP 90.3, and I was their New York sales guy. So they were flying me out to Manhattan, Brooklyn once a month, and I was doing sales meetings and sponsorships out there. And it was really during that transitional period between KCTS and KEXP that my ex-boyfriend and I developed this really bad addiction to Oxycontin. I had been getting prescribed painkillers for a couple of years due to kidney stones and whatnot. So it just sort of escalated from there. So it turned into a daily habit. And then Oxycontin turned to heroin very quickly, turned to smoking heroin, and then turned to smoking heroin and meth. And at that point, we had both lost our jobs. We got evicted from our apartments, burned every bridge, probably possible for that time, borrowing money from friends and family, and then just, not following up. And, I was just essentially a shell of a human being at that point, really lost any sense of self. When we became homeless, I became suicidal, and we started to steal to support our habit. And that ended up in this crazy, just downward spiral of being caught up in this criminal life for a short time. Stealing then quickly turned into fraud and identity theft, and just running with some really, really, lost souls, I would say. And after about a year and a half, we were arrested.
Can you tell me a little bit more about addiction? What did addiction do to you as a person, to your personality, to how you lived your life?
Addiction completely changed who I was, almost at a cellular level, and just the way that I thought. And I mean, it's crazy to think about, right? Because right now I recently celebrated 7 years of sobriety in March.
Congratulations.
At the end of March. Thank you. March 29th is my clean and sober date. So I'm 7 years removed. So sometimes it's difficult to go back into that state of mind, right? Because I look back at that person, and it's just crazy to try and get into that headspace again, because I'm so far removed from it. I don't say that I'm cured by any means, because every day I'm grateful for my sobriety, and it's an ongoing thing. But I have built up enough processes in my head and just ways to counterbalance those trains of thought when I get into thinking about using or thinking about those days, right? It literally got to the point where I couldn't even look in the mirror. I couldn't look in the mirror without just wanting to kill myself, without just wanting to end everything, because I saw no other way out. And I was literally caught in this cycle of like every day was Groundhog's Day, because it would be wash, rinse, repeat every day. Get up, get high, make a plan to make money, to get more drugs, and then like to go to the casino or something. It's just this sick cycle. And it really, the relationship I was in at that point, when we had lost everything, it just became this. I mean, even before that, actually, almost from the beginning, it was codependent and co-addictive. And then it turned very toxic and abusive as well. And those are things I would never put up with now in my life ever. But when you're in that state of mind, you are just so focused on using or getting high or feeling like there's no hope. You just allow things to happen to you, which is really crazy for me, because I started using and experimenting with drugs at a young age. I was 15. It was after my first sexual experience with another man, because I didn't come out till I was 24. So when I was 15, after that experience, I got very depressed, and that's when I smoked my first cigarette, got drunk for the first time, smoked weed. But I did what I think, whatever you want to classify normal as, right? For a normal teenager, I partied with my friends, I drank, experimented with drugs in college, was in the rave scene here. And I still love electronic music, but would get out, did a bunch of Molly and hallucinogens like mushrooms and acid. But I graduated within 4.5 years from UW. I had a career after that, and I still partied and drank and did, I guess, what you could say the normal partying habits are, but I guess they're really not normal. but I was still able to maintain, right? I was able to have a life and keep up with everything and still build a successful career. But it was when pills and opiates and painkillers came into my realm, and they really just changed my brain. I went from being able to maintain to just focusing on that every day. It was like I wanted to get high every day. I wanted that feeling every day. And that really changes your brain on a chemical level. It was from those moments of wanting to use every day that you really get into this total addict mentality of everything else comes second. You need to get high first. And that's just not the person that I was or that I am today. So looking back, it's life pre-addiction and life post-addiction, because during addiction, I wasn't myself. I mean, even my friends and family just remember my behavior. And I mean, I did things that I had a lot of guilt and shame over that I had to work through. Never again. I would never fucking do those actions that I did.
So while you were going through that process of addiction, what was it like for your family? I assume you've talked to them about it, and your friends. Did they see what was going on? How did they react? How do they feel about it now?
We hid things for a while, so we were able to maintain relationships in that addiction for a little while. Sooner than later, there were instances, are just really, really big red flags that started popping up everywhere. So I'd gotten laid off from KEXP. So, I was on unemployment and they were, paying me decent, but we were still running out of money all the time. So I'd use that as an excuse to always borrow money from my family or from my mom specifically, or from my friends. Right. So I would just kind of go through. I'm very blessed to, have a lot of friends and a big support circle, or I did back then. So, I reached out to just different people at different times, and sooner or later they started talking, and then it's like, well, what's really going on with Vik, and then just little things. I was becoming highly unreliable, which of course happens when you're an addict. So soon those signs started popping up. I think my mom was in denial for a while because, my brother has addiction issues. So I don't think she wanted to believe that was what was going on with me, because I was always the good kid, the honor student, the overachiever, right? So I think she just turned the other way and just helped me when she could. But then soon everybody started catching on, and I heard a lot of people's feelings, and there was a lot of guilt around that I had to deal with once I got sober. But and speaking to everybody now, most everybody has, I've apologized to mostly everybody, and they've given me their forgiveness, which has been, really, really amazing and beneficial for my healing and for theirs. So there's been this, mutual love and forgiveness and apologies. So I'm really blessed that I got a chance to do that, and to make amends, and to say, I'm so sorry, and to explain the situation, and to say, look, this is not who I really am. There were obviously extenuating circumstances behind it. Obviously, I take full responsibility for those actions and what I did, because I was the one that made the choice to use and go down that path. But, most everybody's been super understanding of what happened. And I live my life now as a testament to that, to show that, look, you can change. I have changed. That's not who I really am. And I think about that almost every day, that this is my second chance. This is my opportunity to show everybody that I am the man that I say that I am now. I am a man of my word. I am not that person that I was. It took some time, but I'm in a really, really good place with my family and my friends.
Your process of getting sober, though, was different than maybe the typical story we hear, because you were cut short by ending up going to jail. Can you talk kind of about what you remember about that process of going through a trial and stuff like that? And do you have any recollection of how that affected you at the time? And
Oh yeah, of course. Well, because there wasn't a trial. We were guilty as hell. So I'm just going to say that right now. We weren't trying to fight it at all. We knew what we had done, and we were ready to accept responsibility for it. We were hoping for less time. We were hoping for a better deal, but what happened. So for those that don't know how the process goes, because a lot of people don't, I didn't understand when I first got arrested, right? I didn't understand anything with the legal process, which is a scary thing, actually. And they don't, pull you into a room and say, so you've just been arrested, so this is what you can expect. It doesn't go like that at all. So when you first get arrested, you go to jail, and then they officially charge you. So you have all these court dates and everything. And if you don't bail out, and it's, if you don't have a criminal record, they might do, and if it's a lower charge, they'll just do what's called they'll PR you, which is release you on your personal recognizance. But if you, get in the system for a while, they're automatically going to assign you bail. And if you can't bail out, then you're locked up for basically the whole course of however long that case is going to go. So ultimately, you have all these hearings. You meet with your public defender if you don't pay for a private attorney, and then you can choose to go to trial, or you can choose to work with the attorney and the prosecution to get yourself the best deal. So when the process first started, I thought we could get this program called a drug offender sentencing alternative, or DOSA. And that's what my attorney thought too, which was, you get released, or you don't get released, but you go to rehab, you get treatment, and then you are just on probation. But very quickly, we found out that the Secret Service got involved in our investigation, because we had done a lot of damage. Then we knew we were looking at prison time, but then we were hoping for a prison DOSA, which is basically you do half your sentence in prison, and then you get out, and then you go to treatment. But the prosecution wasn't having any of that. They wanted to make an example out of us. None of us had ever been in trouble like this before in our lives. But the prosecutor, she wanted to throw the book at us. So we ultimately got all these like they literally could have charged us with hundreds of charges, but we got it narrowed down to 25, and the range for that was 63 to 84 months, so basically 5 to 7 years. And the prosecution wanted a sentence above the standard sentencing range. She wanted to give us 120 months, so 10 years. So when I first heard that, I was fucking scared, scared. I didn't come out of my jail cell for like 3 days. I think I was just like, what the fuck is going on, right?
And were they holding you at the King County Jail, or where?
We were in Snohomish County Jail.
Okay.
So we got arrested in Mukilteo, so up in Snohomish County, just north of Seattle. But ultimately what happened was we had charges in Snohomish County, King County, and Skagit County. So we did what's called a global resolution. Finally, after the investigation was done, they worked with the prosecution to finalize a set of charges. And then that's when we came up with the plea deal. So they said, we'll give you global resolution so you can wrap this all up into one case here in this county and not have to go to several. And whatever sentence you get, that's the sentence. So we were asking the judge for our standard range. And at that point, I had been in jail for over a year. So I was just like, just get me out of here. Cause I didn't go outside for the whole, I was in jail for 16 and a half months, and I didn't step outside one time. I was kept indoors in this, what I call a concrete coffin, and no music, barely any TV. I mean, and music's like oxygen to me. So it was just terrible. But, you know, I did start using that time to work on myself, but I'll get to that later. We ultimately ended up spending 16 and a half months in jail until we went to present our plea deal to the judge. So we took a plea deal. If you went to trial, that'd be another process. So then you'd go through the whole trial process. We wanted the best deal possible because we were obviously guilty and we weren't trying to fool anybody here. And we wanted to take responsibility. So we took our plea deal before the judge, and it was up to the judge that day. So I could have gotten as low as 5 years, or I could have gotten as high as 10 years. I didn't know. Normally everything's agreed upon before you go in. So it was one of the scariest days of my life. And ultimately, we all got different sentences, but I got the high range. I got 84, which I was fine with. At that point, I had been in jail for 16 months. I was like, I can do another 3 years in prison.
Did the time you'd serve count towards what you were doing?
Oh,
already?
yeah, 100%. Yes. Otherwise, I would have been pushing to get bailed out. I would have begged my family to bail me out. But yeah, that went towards it. So by the time I left jail, I had just a little bit over 3 years to do. You know, honestly, going to prison, it was summer, it was August. Getting to step outside on the prison yard for the first time, I got to go outside for that first day. We got to Shelton, which is the classification prison, the Washington Correction Center, and it was like, I mean, I still remember that first day. I still remember getting to walk outside and feeling the sun on my face. Yeah, I'm like, I think about it, I get emotional because it's like, you know, it's really cruel to do that to somebody, right? Like to make them sit inside for 16 months, like not even letting them like feel sunshine on their face, right? Like what the fuck is that? But I remember like being outside, feeling the sun, feeling the wind, the breeze. It was warm. And then I remember that first night, there's speakers in the cells there. So, and they play music for you. They play the radio. And I remember hearing Madonna's Beautiful Stranger. And I remember like Madonna was one of the singers I thought, like obviously Britney Spears, because she's my favorite. But but I would sing Madonna songs in my head in jail just to like pass the time, or, you know, different artists. And I remember hearing that song, and it literally like filled me with this such intense joy and life and energy. Like I was like, oh my God, I will remember this day till the day I die. And I still do. And it was like being reborn again in prison, you know? So, but so yeah, jail's definitely way harder time to do than prison. So I was very happy to go, actually, because I'd already made peace with the time that I was going to serve. So it was like, okay, this is it. So, you know, let's get back to some resemblance of life, you know, which music is and outdoors, you know, these are things we take for granted. And just to get those two things back were such a huge blessing. And I'll never forget that.
While you were going through that process in the first 16 months, I imagine that's where you had to deal with your drug addiction.
Oh, yeah.
How did that process go? How were you able to do it? Did they have any support for you while you were in there, or was it something that you were just left on your own?
Yeah, I mean, I really just did it on my own. They had AA and NA meetings, but it was kind of a joke. I mean, to be honest, I mean, I went to a few, but they take you from one indoor space to another indoor space. You're just in this room, and I don't know. It didn't vibe with me in there. So I literally was on my own. It took a couple of months for me to really understand the damage I had done to my life and how far I had fallen and what I had lost, and then how much I got to gain back, to make that decision to say, okay, yeah, I knew it was my second chance, but I still grappled with this idea of, oh, maybe I could get out and drink, or, maybe smoke weed or something like that. And I finally just, after a few months, made that decision. Like, no, I obviously wasn't going to use meth and heroin again, but I need to be clean and sober 100%. And then it was that point too that I started working out. And I started working out in jail, where there's no equipment, nothing for you to use. It's just literally whatever you can figure out. It's funny. So, I mean, fitness has been a huge part of my life ever since. And I pretty kind of crazy addicted to CrossFit. Well, I hate using the term addicted, but I do it pretty religiously. Right. And working out and it's just part of my program for life, to not only stay clean and sober, but for my mental health, for everything. It brings me so much joy. And it all started in a jail cell in Snohomish County Jail. I think it was June of 2013. And I had gotten this cellmate who was this little like street kid. He was this little ginger street kid. He was probably 21, 22, super young, like a baby. And for a week straight, I saw him just start working out, like just doing push-ups and like sit-ups and stuff in our cell. And after about a week, he was like looking at himself shirtless in the mirror, and he was kind of flexing. And I was like, holy shit, like I can actually see a difference on this kid. Like, wow. And in my mind, I was like, well, if this little fucking dude can do this, then I can do it too. So I was 115 pounds. I couldn't do one push-up. Couldn't do a push-up. I had to do them on my knees. And so I started with literally on my bunk doing like 3 sets of 10 push-ups, and then I would do 50 crunches. And that's what I would do every day for like 2 weeks. And after 2 weeks, I saw a little bit of definition on my chest. I'd never seen it before. And from that point on, I just never stopped. So I started getting books from the book cart, filling my laundry bag with books. I mean, I would read them too. In the whole course of my incarceration, I read over 200 books. And I would do curls with it, right? So I would do curls and then tricep raises. And then I would get cellmates, and we would figure out all these other ways to make it harder for ourselves. We would get our towels, and we would do like one of them. I would hold the towel like a barbell, and they would pull down on it, and I would curl it up. And then we would do tricep stuff with it. Then we figured out how to fashion like a pull down mechanism with sheets, where one of us would sit on the top bunk and hold the sheet, and then we would pull it down for like back, and then we would do burpees and squats and all these different things. And it was just a really crazy, unique, fun way to pass the time and to be a little bit ingenious with it. And then when I finally got to prison, and after about a month at Shelton, we got to go to the weight deck, and that's where I started. And then I got to Walla Walla and got my weight card within the first few days, and started working out on the weight deck and never stopped. So really health and wellness. And now, I mean, I started meditating when I was in prison. The last 6 months I was there, I started doing yoga. So this combination of like a holistic method of working out, meditation, yoga is just part of what I do to stay sane and sober. And it works for me. I'm the best version of myself that I've ever been.
Once you were sober in jail and kind of had to grapple with everything that would happen, how did you deal with the depression you must have felt at that time?
Oh, I worked out, right?
You got those endorphins going.
You got those endorphins going. I mean, it really changed my life. I had never been on any kind of solid workout routine before, ever. So to get to be active and physical in there, yeah, I mean, it helped immensely. Yeah, it was fucking depressing in there. Jail is a depressing place with a bunch of lost souls. And I had to deal with a lot of guys coming in that were still detoxing, or, still, I mean, most guys in there didn't have that spark of transformation like I did to change their life. So they were still just ready to do the same shit that they were doing that got them in there. But I did have good friends in there. Really good guys that I met that I was like, okay, I can vibe with you, and we can chat, and we can, get to know each other. So, I did have some good friends in there that I was able to talk to, and I was really blessed to have those opportunities to connect with people. So that also helped pass the time and to help me with just my mental state. Cause man, you're going through so much stress in there. Like you don't know what's going to happen to you. You don't know where you're going or where this is all going to lead or end up. So you have to be able to vent and commiserate and talk to guys that have been through the system before and know at least better than I did what I should expect or how things are going to go. That definitely it helped to be able to call my mom and my friends. Like my best friend Nicole, she was a godsend. She always, you have to pay to use the phone. I mean, essentially it's on your family or friends to put money on their phone account or on yours, right? No, you start making money when you go to prison and you have a job, but I only made $50 a month. So but you can put money from what you make towards that.
Let's put a pin in that real quick and talk about it though. That's what, $1.50 a day?
I mean, cents.
Yeah.
you make sense, right? For hours of work. So
I think there's a lot of people who haven't been to jail or prison that don't understand the way the system works and how little you make, and then you have to pay for time on like a computer, a tablet, phone, like you were talking about. Were there commissaries you visited? What was the economic system within the jails?
yeah, so it's here in Washington State, well, in Snohomish County. So jail, what you can get in jail is, you have to pay to use the phone. And then we had a commissary system as well where you could order extra food, right? So, I mean, there's a commissary system in prison too. It's more robust than the one in jail. So, but I was very lucky that my mom supported me in that because she understood how terrible the food was in there and how unhealthy, and it's just not doesn't have many nutrients at all. So, so yeah, I was able to buy tuna and like protein and coffee and just different things. But that was all on my family, right? That was a burden on them. But yeah, you have to pay for all of that. And if you're indigent or you don't have a support system, which most guys are, it's really, you don't have access to any of that. So it's really sad. It's unfortunate. They really put up a huge roadblock for you to feel human and to have support, because a lot of these guys too, if they're indigent, their families are indigent, they can't afford to put money on the phone, right? It's just taxing on the whole family, on everybody. And then when you get to prison, it's a little bit more, there's more options, but everything costs money, right? So I had to buy a TV for my room. I was lucky enough to have the support to do that. There's a company, they're still in power. Basically, they're called JPay. And there's a in-prison system where you can get on these computers. It's not internet, but you get on these JPay stations, and you can do email with your family and friends, but every single email back and forth costs money. And then you can get now they're tablets, but when I was there, it was like a little iPod with a touch screen, and you can buy music. And I mean, that was a godsend, but yeah, you have to pay for every song. And I mean, just like here, but it's not like you can do streaming or anything, but you pay like $2 a song, and you have a little, music player. Now it's a tablet, so there's more options, but everything costs money. There's the phone system there, that costs money. They have commissary, that costs money. And if you're only making like $20 to $50 a month, that goes so quickly. And then you get food. They have these things called food packages every quarter, where you or your family can buy the food package. You can get up to 20 pounds of food, and that costs money. That's a couple $100. So I mean, the system that and just to circle back real quick before I say that, but you're making sense on the hour. So, I mean, they're getting full days work out of you. And some people might say, oh, well, you're in prison, so you deserve it or whatever. But what's ethical treatment of human beings when they're like, what do you define as being ethical? What's being okay? And I don't think that's okay. I don't think people should be treated like slaves. And that's a whole other topic. But it's, it's the system is definitely, the economic system in jails and prisons is definitely fucked up. I'm just going to say that. And the system is not meant to help you out. It's meant to exploit you.
It seems like a very dehumanizing experience. I mean, prison in general is dehumanizing, but you add on these layers of other dehumanizing levels. How, other than working out, I mean, how, and forming those bonds with people who'd been through it, how did you make it through it? Like, what was it that drove you to know that on the other side you might be able to change your life?
It was just that. It was that thought of, like, when I made the realization to get clean and sober, and I say this a lot, it's like, I did not want my story to end there. I did not want that to be the final chapter. I did not want my story to be a tragedy that my friends and family or people that knew me would say in passing and say, "Oh, did you hear about Vik? Yeah, that's a tragedy right there. That's a terrible thing that happened to him." I didn't want my story to end with those conversations because I knew those conversations were happening, right? And that was so painful to come to that realization that people were saying that about me, right? But it was the truth. But I had the power to change that and to know that I could pick up that pen and be the author of my own life and my own story and choose to write the rest of it. And it was not going to be a story of tragedy. It was going to be triumph and redemption. And it was that thought that was so empowering to me that I was like, oh, okay, I get to write the rest of the story and I get to dictate how it's going to go. And that's what I did. And that's what drove me every day, not only with working out. I mean, I was this scrawny little dude back then, and it was so intimidating to go onto the weight deck with all these other big guys that had done years in prison and had been working out. And, they looked at me, and I'm sure they talked some shit too, but I was super dedicated and I was there all the fucking time, every day with my workout journal, ready to hit it. And then they respected me after that. I started writing again. I've always been a writer. I wanted to write a screenplay and had started that process in my previous life when I was working at KCTS. So I started writing every day and I wrote a screenplay that's almost finished. Started meditating, doing all the things, right? Reading all the time. It was just this thought of like, let's make myself the best version of me. Let's rebuild myself, mind, body, and soul. So when I get out, I can hit the ground running and make this shit happen. I always wanted to be a filmmaker. I always wanted to start a production company. I wanted to do this docuseries and this documentary film. So I need to be equipped personally in every aspect of who I am to make that happen. And it was those thoughts and also reconnecting with my friends and family. I had visions, I manifesting like those reunions and those moments where they could see me, and those came to fruition. Those happened. And for them to see me in this best version of myself, so yeah, I wasn't going to take the opportunity for granted, and it was empowering. It was empowering to me. And that's how I got through it. And that's how I kept my drive up.
What was it like when you stepped out of prison and you were free?
Oh man, it was overwhelming. So there were kind of two different moments for that, because I got to leave the Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla and come back to Seattle for work release. So that was a moment in itself to like come back to the city. I was still incarcerated, but still to come back to the city and step out onto the city street. And like, I remember the first moment so you come back, and then you're on lockdown for 3 days, and then they send you out on passes to start doing shit like get your license or get your ID, set up a cash this check they give you. I think they loan you. I can't remember how much they loan you to get started. It's like $100 or something like that. Then you go buy your your Orca card. So that moment of putting real clothes back on and then stepping out onto the streets of Seattle, you're right, in like near the International District. So Reynolds work releases on 4th, and it's almost where Yesler would cross it if Yesler didn't go over the street. Mm-hmm. So it's right there.
Right by the
courthouse.
So
we walked to the International District, to the Bank of America there. Then we walked to like the Orca office, and then the DOL on Spring Street, 2nd and Spring. So I just remember that feeling of being back in the city, and it was September, so it was still warm, and the sights and the sounds and the smells, and I could smell Puget Sound, and it was so crazy. It was nerve wracking because you have a limited amount of time. Like anything in work release, you have a set time that you have to be back. So you're always watching the clock. So that was nerve wracking, but it was also awesome too.
It's kind of interesting because you went from, you have lots of time during your day to figure stuff out, to suddenly you have these deadlines.
Yeah. And that's, a lot of guys can't cut it. It stresses us all out, but a lot of guys get sent back to prison because they mess up, they break the rules, or they do something wrong. And so it's like you see guys dropping like flies. It's like freaking Survivor. I mean, it really, really is, because like, who's going to get voted out of work release today? So many guys did. One guy, like, he got sent home right after our outing to do all those errands because he was a moron and he called his girlfriend, and she came and met him, and they, I don't know, they went off and did whatever, but and then they caught him. I mean, they're always watching. So, but anyway, that was like the first moment of sort of quote unquote freedom, although it wasn't, but just to be back from Walla Walla and to be back walking around the city, it was insane. my actual first moments of freedom on January 25th, 2018. So, I mean, my mom had been coming to the work release and picking me up to do these social outings. So it wasn't a new experience to step out of that building, but to step out of that building for the last time, to just shake that off. And like, I cried. I walked out to my mom's car, and I remember I cried for just like 5 minutes, just like, oh my God, it's over. It's over. Like, it's really over. 5 years, it's really over. And we had to go straight to the my DOC office in Renton to check in with my community corrections officer, my CCO, for my probation, because I was on a year of probation. So immediately did that, got that out of the way, and then came home. And then my best friend Nicole came and picked me up, and I went out to her place in North Bend and hung out for the night, which was great. I went and I bought my phone, I bought my computer, because I had the stack of money that I built up, which was great. And those were my first 2 gifts to myself. And then I did a freedom dinner the next night at my workplace, which was Piatti in U Village. That's where I worked for during work release, and then for several months afterwards. So I had planned that dinner for years. It was always like, you guys, January 26th, 2018, I'm going to do a dinner. So everybody showed that was going to show. There was like 12 of my friends there, and it was amazing. It was awesome. It was highly emotional, very emotional, but I'll never forget that. It was just like, wow, okay, this is over. But I look back too, and I just have this feeling of being very raw. It was all very raw, right? Like everything was fresh and new, but it's very, very raw, because I was still grappling with what had happened to me. I mean, I still am to this day. You know, it's a traumatic experience, and trauma takes time to heal, but I'm way, way more self-assured and have so much love for myself. And I did at the time, but it's different. I'm way more self-assured now. There was happiness and joy, but there was unease and a little bit of like anxiety of like, wow, okay, this is it. Like, how's it going to go? You know? But I mean, it was all the things. It was all the emotions. I was up and down, but overall it was amazing. I still think about that. I mean, like, I barely slept for like a week, just because I was so running off of a high from freedom, from just, wow, I'm not in there anymore. It's over. So yeah, it was intense.
Now, it must have been when you were on work release, but what was it like the first time you saw your mom and you were no longer in prison, that you were out on work release and you were in the real world, if you want to call it that?
Yeah. So it was the second day I was there. So you're on total blackout the first day. It's a Wednesday. It was Wednesday, September 6th. So Thursday, September 7th, 2017, my mom brought a bunch of clothes. My mom and my brother came and dropped off a bunch of, real world clothes for me. Right. So I could have them to go out on these passes to do whatever and not look like a criminal, or somebody that was homeless or whatever. Because I left prison in a gray sweatsuit, and that's all I had. So I was very blessed. So yeah, it was the second day, and I came to the foyer. They called me, and her and my brother were in there. And so they were like, yeah, you can talk to them for a minute and give them a hug and stuff. So it was all such a blur though, right? I really didn't get a chance to soak it in. It was really more when my mom came to pick me up for my first social, which was after about like a month and a half she did. And yeah, it was strange. It was great. I was happy to be with her and spend time, but everything was so like rushed. Like, you're always on watching the time. You're always on a limited time basis. So when you're on a social, you have to call in every hour to just check in. And so you're always watching the clock. Is it time to check in? But it was great. It was great to come home and to, see my old neighborhood and my house. But everything just felt strange. I felt like an alien a little bit. It took a while to get over that, but it was definitely a culture shock. It didn't feel natural for a while. Yeah, I almost felt like I didn't feel like I belonged. I felt like a visitor. So it was strange at first. It was great to see my mom, but everything just didn't feel natural yet. It was this weird, heightened, limited time, like, thing. It's hard to describe, but it doesn't feel like life yet. It feels like a taste of it, but there's all these other strings attached to it. There's so many strings attached, because at any moment you could go back to prison. Until you actually walk out of that work release door, they can catch you for whatever, or do something, and nothing was guaranteed.
So we've been talking a lot about prison, but I think this would be a good time to circle back and to talk about your life when you were younger. And recently you have posted on your own YouTube channel your coming out story.
Yeah.
What was that process like of personal realization of being gay and figuring out how to grapple with those feelings with the societal pressure that was on you that eventually you came out?
I mean, I knew that I had feelings towards the same sex, towards guys and men, and at a really young age, right? I mean, but I didn't understand it at all. There was no reference point for it. I just knew that something was going on, but I didn't even realize that it was going on, if that makes sense. Like, why am I'm feeling this way, but I didn't have enough self-reflection to be like, I'm feeling this way, right? It just sort of happened. But those feelings definitely started coming to light more in my teens, in my early teens. So I realized that I had sexual feelings towards men and not women, but I was in such denial of it. I was just like, there's no way that this could be happening to me. This is not possible. And this was in the mid 90s. So there was very little, media representation. I mean, Ellen came out a year later, or 2 years later, a year, 2 years later from when this process was happening for me. So there was so much shame behind it, being part of, the Indian community, the Indian culture. It's very, this is very looked down upon back then, even today. So there was a lot to deal with. So I went into this really big state of denial and self-hate. And there was just no way that this was going to be my reality. Like I described earlier, I had my first sexual experience with another guy when I was 15, and that really led me into this dark depression for many months. And I think that's where my addiction issues first started, where I was all of a sudden open to the fact of, mind altering substances, something to bring me out of that. And that continued. I developed this really unhealthy pattern of, anonymous hookups, right? I would hook up with one guy that I would meet online, like in an AOL chat room or on these like phone lines or whatever. That was my only outlet to figure it out, like the internet and then this. So I would meet up with somebody and then feel so much shame and guilt around it, and then college. And once college hit and I was partying all the time, then it was like, it just ramped up more and more. And it was really unsafe, really unhealthy. There's so much to unpack there with just denial and being drunk all the time and it was just so toxic, from grappling with this piece in my head of like, okay, well, I say that I'm straight or that I like girls and try and pursue dating girls and whatnot, but there's just nothing sexual going on there at all. And but on the other half of it, it was like, I'm completely 100% sexually attracted to dudes and I'm hooking up with them, but I'm never going to tell anybody about it. It's this whole toxic like dichotomy, this sort of split version of myself. So I was living out on my own. Finally, I was living in a house in the Greenwood neighborhood with some friends, and had my like real person job of doing sales. It was my first job out of college, which was like sales marketing position with this startup aerospace company before I went to KCTS. And I just got to a point where I couldn't live like that anymore. I had another round of, testing at the doctor, and I was all good. I was clean. But I was just like, I don't want to deal with this insane stress and pressure of what could happen from this behavior. So that started the transformation process for me. And I was just like, okay, well, maybe I can find just one person to hook up with, but actually coming out to anybody still wasn't in the realm of a possibility for me, but that started the process. And then I met somebody online and we started talking and I started to develop feelings for him. And then, like I say in my YouTube video, it was like a week later, I went with my friend to see the film Brokeback Mountain. And that really just, it was like a bomb going off in my head. That was really that spark, that realization that, holy shit, like, I've been sort of leading these two lives and, pursuing what I thought was love or emotional feelings, with women, but then sex with men. And then I realized like, oh no, I'm just gay. Like I can actually have it all, right? Like I can have the love and the sex both. It's going to be with a man. And seeing that movie made me realize like, oh yeah, I'm just fucking gay. And I'm super, I'm finally 100% happy and comfortable with that term for myself. And that's just me. And I let, I'm not going to let that hold me back anymore. So that was a huge moment in my life. And it felt like this, just this weight that had been building up for over a decade, just my whole life really, but really over the past decade, it was like I finally could just let all that shit go. And ever since that point, I live out and proud, and I'm so fucking happy that God made me this way, that I'm gay, that I'm part of the LGBTQ plus community. It's a huge part of my life, and I wouldn't have it any other way. And that's a big part of my life now. When I talk about self-love and acceptance, I want everybody to feel that way about themselves. And that was just part of my self-love journey for me, was having that realization finally, and being able to be 100% my true authentic self.
What was it like when you were able to come out to your family?
So with my friends, I came out to all my friends first. And it was nothing but 100% pure love and acceptance and joy and celebration. And, some of them it was a surprise too. Some of them it wasn't. They were like, yeah, we've had a feeling or whatnot, which is totally fine. And, I told my brother and sister as well at that time, and they were, my sister was a little worried that people would view me differently. And I guess that was my whole worry my whole life, was that I didn't want anybody to look at me differently, like I was different or something, right? Or that I wasn't just Vik, the Vik that they knew. But I'm happy being different. I'm happy being who I am, and that's fine, but I'm still me. So I didn't come out to my mom until a year later, and she had a really negative reaction to it at first, but then after like 2-3 days, she came around. And so it's all that, it's the Indian culture, and, she's very protective, and I don't know, there's so much to unpack with that, but ultimately it was hard for her at first. It was very emotionally dramatic, but then very quickly she bounced back from it and was like, no, of course I love you. Like that's who you are. And that's, I love you for that. So, but just, at the time, in the 90s, when I was in the closet, there really wasn't any role models until, Ellen came out, or that I knew of. There were, but I wasn't exposed to that. And I think for me too, there were two stories of celebrities that had finally came out right before I came out, that was really impactful for me. And one was TR Knight from Grey's Anatomy, and then one was Neil Patrick Harris. It was a very like nonchalant, yeah, I'm gay, so what? You know what I mean? Like that's not, I think TR Knight was like, I hope that's not the most interesting part of me, or something like that. Just getting to kind of that level of, they were just like, yeah, that's who I am. I really respected that. And I was like, whoa, like these are actors on TV that I watch all the time. And so that definitely helped too. Now, today, the landscape is just beautiful. There's so much out there for, young queer kids and teens to watch and absorb, and to look up to, and to help them find, where they feel like they fit in, right? Because I think everybody wants to feel part of something. And there's so many facets and shades and colors to being queer, to being LGBTQ plus. It's amazing, and I'm just so proud of our community and how far we've come, and the world for the levels of acceptance we have. We're nowhere near where I feel we need to be. Yeah. There's still a lot of hate and bigotry out there in this country and around the world. Shockingly, but we're so much further along than even when I came out, or when I was in my teens. So it's a really, the future looks bright for anybody. And I just encourage, if anybody's listening that's struggling with their sexuality, like there's nothing to be afraid of. There's no guilt or shame. You're exactly the way you were meant to be made, just as you are. And if people in your life can't realize that or don't see that, fuck them. Sorry, but fuck them. There's millions of other people that will accept you and love you for who you are. And I know that might be scary to think about letting go of those relationships, or thinking that your friends are your life, or even your family. And if your family doesn't accept you, you know what, there's like I said, millions of people out there that will accept you for who you are. And if you have to leave that environment, I highly encourage you to do that, to get to where you feel comfortable and loved, because toxic relationships and toxic environments aren't going to help you one bit.
It's hard to go from there because that's such a powerful message. So, and I don't want to take away from it, but I am curious, just because for people who haven't been to jail, prison, on the outside, I think our take is from movies. It's from TV shows. What was your experience being gay in prison? Was it something that you were open about, or was it something that it depended on where you were or what year it was, people
Yeah.
around you?
Yeah, I mean, I was open with my sexuality. I wasn't like flaunting it or like, hey, everybody, I'm Vik, I'm gay, but I definitely didn't hide anything. I mean, I was 31 when I was arrested. So, I mean, the closet doors have been swung open years ago. I mean, I picked and choose who I had those conversations with, definitely, but I didn't hide it at all. And, nobody, there was only one time that somebody called me the F word to my face. That was like my last year in prison. He was this moron, big Samoan dude that apologized 5 minutes later, but because he was just on some anger bomb issues. And I know people talk shit about me or was like, oh, identified me. There's that gay dude or there's that, fag or whatever. But I didn't care. I mean, I was just like, your opinion has nothing to do with who I am, nor does it affect me. So yeah, I didn't hide it. And when I was in prison, I actually had a relationship with somebody. I had technically a boyfriend in there for 9 months, and he was somebody that was not out. I mean, he was what I call a straight identified bisexual or a sib, as I don't know if anybody ever used that term, but so he had played it straight all his life. He had a wife and was divorced, was in the military. Nobody ever knew. He had sexual encounters with men in his life, but we had become friends. He had been moved to my tier, which is like the row of cells like that I'm a part of, like the floor, and we became friends, and we're just friends for several months. I had no idea that he was. I did find him attractive, but I just never thought that we would ever go down that route, that it was even a possibility. And then after several months of just being friends and being part of like the same friend circle in there that we kept very small, we were speaking in my cell, or we call it our house. So we're in my house one night, and I had been upset about something. Like my friend had made not like a homophobic remark, but I mean, there's so much ignorant shit that goes on in prison. It's just a bunch of dudes thrown together, and I wouldn't really call it the most woke place you could say. And my friends joked around or just sometimes said stupid shit. And normally I could just let it roll off my back. I'm not offended. I don't get offended easily at all. But that day something was said, I just remember, and I was just upset, and I was venting to him. Let's call him Josh, because I don't want to out him on here. That's his business. So I was venting to Josh, and I was like, man, this, sometimes it's hard for me, just being like I wasn't the only gay guy at Walla Walla in the minimum security section, but I felt like it, right? And I was just like, you guys don't understand how it is to be gay in here. It's just, I don't usually let things affect me, but man, sometimes you guys are just fucking stupid. Like, just, blah, blah, blah. And he said something like, well, what do you mean you don't think I understand what you feel like? And I was like, yeah, I don't think you do. And he like starts to say something, and then he stops, and I was like, what are you going to say? And he's like, nothing. He like backs away, and I was like, no, tell me what, and then he finally is like, and he's like, I'm bisexual. And I was like, what? Like, what? In my head. And I was just stunned. I was like, holy shit. Okay. And then in my head, I'm like, oh, wait, so are you telling me there's a chance? Like, right? So you're telling me there's a chance, right? What was all that 1 in a million talk? but so we kind of left the conversation there. We chatted for another minute, but then they called lockdown. So we didn't actually get a chance to talk about it again till the next evening. And I'd been thinking all day, like, how am I going to tell him that I hope he likes me, or I like him, or, it spawned all these feelings and thoughts that I never thought I could go down that road. But then I was like, oh my God, I can. And wow, I like him, and I'm attracted to him, and blah, blah, blah. And so then the next night we're chatting again, and I'm like wanting to tell him that I'm attracted to him. And it's like, I'm so scared and stressed out, because what if I tell him this and he just was like, no, I only just told you because you're my friend, and I just need a friend, so I didn't want to break that trust. But I finally got up the guts to tell him that, I was attracted to him. And then he was like, yeah, good. I'm attracted to you as well. So that's what started it. It was crazy. It lasted for like 9 months, and we didn't get many opportunities to like be together or whatever. I mean, we didn't ever have sex. I mean, we did other stuff, but like, it was few and far between. And I don't know, it was this tumultuous, weird thing. Like he told me he loved me after a couple weeks, and then I said, it's like, I love you too. But everything was just so heightened in there, it was just, it was crazy and it was weird. And then, I mean, it was cool, but it was weird. And then it just turned really bad because he got out. I mean, he like wanted to end things in October. This was like a couple months before he got out in January. But then like we sort of reconciled. I was fucking pissed though. I was like, fuck you. And he was like, well, no, why can't we just, because he was like, I don't think I can have a relationship when I get out. And after he'd said all this other stuff. So in hindsight, I was an idiot to think that anything with him could ever possibly work out outside of there. But like I said, everything's heightened in there. So we ended up getting out in January, and my best friend Nicole would like communicate with him through Facebook for me, right? And he was, communicative for a couple months, and then he just ghosted me and never gave me his phone number, never, and then like 4 or 5 months later, I call her and she tells me, she's like, babe, I don't know how to tell you this, but he's got a girlfriend. And I was like, wow. Okay. So that was really hard. I mean, I literally got my heart broken. So dealing with a broken heart in prison's not fun.
I bet not.
No, I got really depressed for a couple weeks. And luckily my friend Tyler, got me through it. I chose him as the one person I kind of confessed what happened with and told him. And, he was such a lifesaver for me in there. And then when I got out, a couple of days after I was released, a year later, he messages me on Facebook. Like he gets the nerve up and he messages me and he's like, I'm sorry for what happened and I'd love a chance to make amends with you. And here's my number. Call me. And at first I'm like, fuck you. I'm not, you don't get to say, call me. Like, but I didn't respond to him for months and months and months. And then, I was dating this guy and that ended at the end of that summer. So I finally messaged him back and I found out he broke up with his girlfriend too. So I was like, okay, this is a good spot. So I messaged him and I'm like, hey, I don't know what you have to say to me, but I'm open. And, I gave him my number and he called me the next day and, it took a while, but I ultimately did forgive him. And we hung out a couple of times and kind of scratched that itch that we had started in there. But it was just great closure for me. It was nice to see him again and to finally get to do some things that we wanted to do. But it just was like I said, it was great closure. It made me realize that it never would have worked and we're just better as friends and he's going to live his life the way he's going to live. And that's not anything that I want to be a part of. So yeah, there's that little side note story.
So let's talk about Unincarcerated here before we finish. I mean, I feel like we could talk to you forever, but at some point we should probably start thinking about wrapping it up.
Yeah, definitely.
You
and we can always do more, for another episode.
That's true.
So,
I mean, I think there's a lot of little pieces here that we could delve into an entire episode on just one of the many topics we've discussed.
Yeah, we could do a whole Vik series of the Unincarcerated podcast, but no, I just have a big head. It's fine.
But seriously though, how did you meet Spencer, your co-founder for Unincarcerated?
Yeah, we met at Reynolds Work Release. So he got transferred there from Monroe probably a month after me. And we immediately just gravitated toward each other. Like we had a conversation and I just knew he was just like-minded like me. Super, super motivated, super driven. I knew we had mutual friends. And then he told me that he was starting to work for this guy named David Israel, who I had actually heard about through my friend Milo in Walla Walla. And David he's formerly incarcerated, but he's this super successful entrepreneur, has started many businesses. So I knew who David was. And Spencer told me that he was going to work for him and was going to be his partner in this food company. It was called BFY. And then they started Good Planet Foods, which is just blowing up now. So I knew that this guy was a go-getter, that he was completely like me. So we didn't bring up our media projects till several months into being friends, because we would go to AA together every Sunday morning. We try and work out together. Like, yeah, he's my guy. So finally, I tell him about my background, and then I told him, hey, like, yeah, I really want to do these like film projects. I think it'd be great to do a docuseries to talk about post-prison life. And then I had already started planning out the documentary feature film I wanted to make, which is based on a friend of mine. And we'll talk about this obviously later, definitely. But I'd planned this documentary feature film. And he was like, yeah, David and I have this idea to do this like Shark Tank in prison type show. And I'm doing stuff with the UW Law Society and Justice School, and we're talking about doing a docuseries and blah blah blah, and we're both like, oh great, that's great, yeah, good for you, like that's tell me how it's gonna, tell me how it's going. None of us had the nerve to kind of be like, well, do you want to work with me on mine, but we both were thinking it, right? And then finally, I think it was me. It might have been him. I don't know. We'll have to ask him.
We'll ask him and see how his
we'll ask
story's
him.
different.
Yeah, but we were talking about it, and I feel like it was me, but I could totally be wrong, and I'm not trying to take ownership of this. But one of us, probably me, said, "Dude, so what do you think about us just doing this together? Like, why don't we just do this together?" And it was just like ding, 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 light bulb moment. Yeah, dude, totally. I was like, I can't think of anybody else better than to work with you on it. And that's sort of how this concept of the production company was formed. And then once we both were released, because he got out a month after me in February of 2018, it took us a while to come up with the name Unincarcerated. And it was Spencer that came up with it, actually, because I was playing around with these terms of like rising phoenix or blah, things that the phoenix is really meaningful to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually a tattoo I want to get, but there's so many like rising phoenix or phoenix rising or from the ashes companies out there. It's just not original. And we were just going back and forth on it, and I was like, we're gonna know it when we hear it. And then literally like 5 minutes later, he texted me and he's like, what about Unincarcerated? And I was like, yeah, that's it. And it just made sense. It was like, wow, like I'd never heard that term before. Like I've heard like decarceration or decarcerate, but I'd never heard unincarcerated. And it's almost like a play in words a little bit, like uninterested or on this, or, you know what I mean? But yeah, I'm unincarcerated. I don't know. It just fit. And that's the sort of genesis of how it was formed. And it's been a process, for a couple of years now, slow moving, but we every week, every month, we make progress on this dream, on this company, this vision for the future, because it's the thing for both of us. And I love it, and I love that I have like one of my best friends and my brother as my business partner, and we've assembled such a great team. I mean, you are I can't even scream your praises enough, Cameron.
Thank you.
Like you are.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love. We are so blessed. I'm so grateful to have you part of the team and not just now part of my team, but one of my close friends too. I love you as a human being, and you bring.
I love you too.
Thank you. I love you, man, and I really do. But you bring so much knowledge and passion, and I mean, you're a fucking score for us. I'm like, we got him. Yes, like, dude, and Rachel and Corey are other two team members. So yeah, it's a beautiful thing. And sometimes I get a little impatient and I wish things would move faster, but you can't push things that, need some time to simmer and cook. And I mean, we're simmering, we're cooking, and, sooner than later, we're going to have a great feast from the fruits of our labor. And I know we are. And so, yeah, it's very, very exciting.
So you heard it here first, listeners. Vik changed Spencer's life by coming up with the entire idea.
Yeah, thanks for paraphrasing that way. Yeah, that's perfect.
And truly should be considered the parental figure of Unincarcerated.
Oh, wow. Yeah, sure. Yeah, he's totally telling the truth there.
What do you see as the path forward for Unincarcerated? You've talked about this has been marinating for a couple years, and I think that the production side of it is at a point where it's finally starting to move forward. I mean, this podcast being a part of that. Where do you see Unincarcerated going from a production standpoint, an education standpoint, changing the way people think about the unincarcerated? What does that mean to you, and where do you see it going?
Yeah, I mean, man, the sky's the limit. The galaxy's the limit, really. But what I see is I see us start launching this podcast in the many iterations that we see it going. Being what we're doing right now is a story of us and how we were formed and what we're doing. And then, we've talked about it being a companion piece to the Unincarcerated docuseries, and then our feature documentary film Firestorm as well. So we have some really exciting plans to just take this podcast. We have our Unincarcerated docuseries that I've been filming here and there for the past couple of years, but once we finally are able to launch that, that's going to be really, really exciting. I think it has the potential. I mean, obviously we're going to release it on our YouTube channel, and hopefully it gains traction. I mean, I think it will, because we really, the way we're picturing it and the way we want to do it, it's really something special and different. And I think everybody's going to love it, and just really change perspectives and change mindsets and stigmas, and really like our mission is to do, is to shift the collective consciousness. So that's really exciting. Starting to film Firestorm, getting that completed and that's our feature-length documentary film. And I think those projects will set us up to do so much more. But I'm really excited about getting those out there. Hopefully we can continue to work on those through the next year with COVID. I mean, we've still been able to make progress even during the time of COVID. So it's cool, and it's exciting getting our professional equipment set too in order to do all of that. So those in the short term, those are what I'm really excited about. Long term, I mean, I really see us turning Unincarcerated Productions. Well, first, I see us doing so many more amazing projects, narrative features, feature films, especially with our partner Corey down in LA, producing original content. I hope to get my screenplay produced once it's done, and just doing regular narrative feature films and series, which would be great, partnering with other production companies on that. But also doing in-prison curriculum, teaching, creative writing or filmmaking to current prisoners in the system, and then creating a prison to industry pipeline from that. So actually then hiring those inmates that we have trained and that have learned from us or done any kind of in-prison curriculum, then giving them a chance to come out and work with us as well. There's other people doing that right now, so it's a really exciting time, and we would love to to join in on that fold and to help increase those opportunities, because honestly, we've made strides. There are organizations and programs that do that, but there's not enough. There's just not enough at all. And there's so many of our men and women, our brothers and sisters, that are getting out of the system that don't have a path forward. And we want to provide that for them.
I guess I talked about the podcast, but I didn't mention that there is already 6 episodes, I believe, up of the Incarceration of America series that was your brainchild, that came out of we're stuck at home and we have to do everything through Zoom or whatever. Can you talk a little bit about that series, the short series that's up right now?
Yeah, definitely. When when COVID hit and quarantine hit, it was actually part of a separate conversation for a separate organization me and one of our team members, Rachel Check, had with the Defy Ventures team that we were working with. Defy Ventures is an in-prison program that we were working with, trying to find a path forward. And she actually came up with this idea to interview the formerly incarcerated and get their point of view on this concept of being in lockdown, of being in quarantine, because who better to be a thought leader when it comes to that whole process than somebody that's done time in prison and somebody that's been in solitary. So that's where it came from. And it kind of expanded from there. So it's similar-ish to what we'd like to do with the Unincarcerated series itself, but in a more condensed and very topic specific form, and very, very short. So that all the feature or all the shorts that we've released have been like 5 to 7 minutes or something like that. And we had Chris Wilson on there, who's an author, an entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur, an artist. I mean, he's just a badass human being. So he was our first guest, and we've interviewed others within our network. And I have at least 3 more episodes to release on that as well. But yeah, that was our first sort of series that we've launched on our YouTube. We started our YouTube through that series. So it was really exciting to be creating content and to be putting stuff out there in the time of COVID.
Yeah, it feels like so much has stopped in the world thanks to COVID. And if someone's listening to this at a later, years later, they may not realize the impact it truly had on all of our lives. But, it's impressive that you thought to immediately pivot to producing different and new content, because what you were planning on doing just couldn't happen at that moment.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, we had planned a couple more Unincarcerated docuseries shoots, and everything just fell by the wayside. So it was like, what do we do? And luckily Rachel came up with this idea, and then we just expanded on that, and then it turned into this really, really great opportunity. And I'm really happy that we were able to do that, and with the content that we've been putting out for it.
If you could go back in time to you've been arrested, you're sitting in that jail cell in, you say Snohomish County?
Mm-hmm. I've been to King County Jail too.
Okay.
So, in that whole process, but I did
wherever the first jail you went to, what would you go back and tell yourself? You've been arrested, you're sitting there, you have these charges pending. What would today's Vik go back and tell 2013 Vik as you're sitting there feeling like lost?
That it's all going to be worth it, right? Because honestly, I'm grateful this happened to me. For how far I had fallen, I don't know what would have laid before me if this didn't happen. And it gave me the opportunity, and I looked at it as an opportunity. I mean, yes, I did go away for 5 years of my life, and I wasn't in, quote unquote, the real world, but that was my world, and I used it to the best of my ability. And I surprised myself. Every one of us is so much stronger than we think we are. And I would tell him that you're so much stronger than you think, than you even realize. Like, you're going to get through this. So just breathe, and everything is going to be okay, because ultimately it was, and it did, and it will from this point on too. So, we're so stressed about the future, and we have so many feelings about the past, and it's so hard for us to just like stay present in the present moment. And that's what I would tell them: just stay present, be in the present moment, find peace, and everything will flow forward from that. I look back at him and oh God, there's so much, but yeah, ultimately just everything's going to be okay, because you are so much stronger than you think, and you are going to get through this, and you're going to fly.
It's powerful. Is there anything that you would want someone listening to this right now to know, either about you, about Unincarcerated, about what it's like being in prison, whatever it is? Is there what do you want people to take away from this conversation?
I think overall, I would love for people to just understand what it means to have empathy, and what it means to be empathetic to somebody else's plight, and put yourself in somebody else's shoes, because ultimately this journey for me has made me so much more understanding and patient and empathetic when it comes to other people, because you never know where somebody's been. You never know what's going on in their head. You never know what's going on in their life at that certain time. And if you just have empathy, you won't take anything personally, and you won't impart. We're all judgmental. I don't care who you are, but we all place judgments on people. And to have empathy and to just try and understand where somebody's coming from, that we're all humans on this earth, that we all do want the same thing, that we're all at our core the same, we're not different. I think that's the biggest takeaway, because that's ultimately what we're trying to do with Unincarcerated, is to just shift that perspective, shift that paradigm that people have towards those with a criminal record, those that have done time, right? But it can be applied to anywhere in life. Anybody can ultimately be unincarcerated, because anybody can be incarcerated. You don't have to be in jail or prison. You can be a prisoner of your mind. You can be a prisoner of your circumstance or relationship, and anybody can get unincarcerated. And it starts with empathy, and also gratitude. Gratitude is the key to abundance. When we live in a state of gratitude, it makes us realize how lucky and blessed that we are. We can always be in this mindset of the grass is always greener, right? But if we actually just take stock of what we have in our lives and the beauty and the joy, so much more will flow to you. And it's incredible actually to have a mindset of gratitude, just how much more abundance you will manifest and love. So yeah, I would say empathy and gratitude for sure.
That's amazing. It's something that I think we can all strive to do and to have in our own lives. And if Unincarcerated can change even one mind, I feel like it's doing its job.
100%. And I know that we have, I know that we already have done that. So it's really exciting to see what else we can do, or how far we can take this.
It's amazing. Well, thank you so much, Vik, for sitting down with me today. I think it's important because it lets people see behind the curtain of Unincarcerated, and that this is truly a project that is a passion project, and it's a project that is coming from Spencer in your heart, your minds, your souls. You're putting yourself into it, and that you've lived it and you're living it in a way that it's not about exploiting people. It's about making people's stories heard and getting their voices out there.
100%.
Unincarcerated, the podcast, is a joint production of Unincarcerated Productions and Grindle Industries. All of the music on today's episode, including what you're listening to now, is from the artist Speculation. You can learn more about Spec at speculation.bandcamp.com. That's SPEKULATION.bandcamp.com. We will see you all next time.